Hello, everyone. Hi. Hello. Hi, Nuke for Press. Hi, Brother Bill. Hi, Finn. Hello, Sky Coastaman. Hi, Mystical Machine Gun. Hello, Ben. Thank you so much for the 70 Duke Donuts bits. Wow. 70 bits. Oh, boy. Thank you so much for joining us for our next episode of Streamer Strategies, where we will be discussing connecting through nostalgia. Most of us, a lot of people that I know, especially in my community and like the communities that I frequent, do a lot of content, whether that is Twitch streaming, maybe YouTube stuff, maybe stuff on Twitter or other social media platforms, where they focus a lot on nostalgia and connecting with people through nostalgia and like the games that we played before, or maybe movies and TV shows that we watched as young people growing up, and all of the things that we hold dear to our hearts from our childhood. There's a lot of potential in connecting with other people and using those as vehicles to kind of learn more about each other and connect with people. Hi, Zofar. Hi, Broom Hatter. Hello. It's so great to see you all. Thank you for being here. Thanks for having notifications on. And thank you for coming to join the chat. I have some really talented and amazing human beings that are going to be sharing the stage with me today. I'm so excited to bring these people on, and I really am so grateful for their time and all of their deep knowledge and experiences that they're about to share with us today. Hello, Ghost Train. So without further ado, I'm going to bring my guests on so they can introduce themselves. And let's get to talking. So here we are. Hi, everyone. Hello. Welcome. How's it going today?
Hi.
Hi, everybody.
Hello.
Thank you so much for being here, everyone. So I would love it if we could have everyone introduce themselves and tell us maybe a little bit about what kind of content you create that has a connection to nostalgia. So I'm going to start with Business. We'll go around the room. It's going to go Business, Duke, R Knight, and then Pat. If you all could introduce yourselves and tell everyone a little bit about what you do.
Well, thank you for having me, Ash. Hello, chat. My name is Business. I'm a boy trapped inside of a video game console. I cheated death at Mortal Kombat, so he trapped me in here. I've been streaming on Twitch for 9 years. I've been partnered for 7. And yeah, I talk a lot about video game history. I consider myself an amateur video game historian. And so I play a lot of retro content, but I also play games like Elden Ring and Bloodborne because roommate is also a masochist. And I help run a convention dedicated to the games of Metal Gear Solid called Memes, Genes, and Snakes Con, or MGS Con, if you will, which we just had our second convention last weekend, and it was an absolute blast. So that's a little about what I do.
Yo, that's awesome. I can't wait to hear more about MGS Con and all the other cool stuff that you do. Thanks for being here. Okay, Duke.
I'm Duke Donuts. You probably have seen me in this 70-bit alert that's all over. I stream a lot of retro games. I have I have a lot of retro hardware that I like to dig into, and sometimes I'll do tech streams, sometimes break stuff open and try to fix stuff or modify stuff that I need to. Sometimes we'll look at old magazines, things from old Nintendo Power or EGM, that kind of stuff. And I try to find interesting, weird games that other people have not really experimented much with. Currently, I'm working on finishing Tritorn Final. I got it somewhere here. Finishing Tritorn Final from
Classic.
The commercial discs, which we don't have any evidence is actually possible, and we have some evidence to say that it might not be possible to finish the game on the regular commercially released discs. We just found that out a few months ago, and now I used one of the dumped discs from the internet to progress past the point where we were locked, and now I'm playing the rest of it on the commercial discs, and that's something.
That is.
It's been fun. It's been fun though.
Nice. And, love to see you play those Sharp X68000 games. Those are a very big favorite of mine. So
Here it is.
Yes, nice, love it. R Knight, tell us a little bit about what you do.
How's it going, guys? My name is Knight. Been streaming on Twitch for about 9 years or so. I play a lot of retro games. I do a lot of first playthroughs and been starting to do deathless challenges. The biggest deathless challenge I've done so far, we played Castlevania 1 through 4, deathless in one sitting. Yeah, we just do a lot of cool challenges and first playthroughs, and it's a good time.
Nice, nice. That I've seen some of those deathless challenge runs and they are really, really fun to watch. Yeah, that is so cool. Thanks for being here, Knight. Pat, tell everyone about yourself.
My name is Pat Contry. I have been on YouTube since 2008, and I was streaming beginning in 2010 on Ustream. For all the kids out there, Ustream existed way before Twitch did. And I used to do the NES Charity Marathon on Ustream. So I only was streaming once or twice a year because it wasn't really a big thing yet. And then I moved over to Twitch around, I want to say 2014 or 15, and then have only been doing it regularly for the past 4 to 5 years, streaming classic TV commercials from the 70s, the 80s, and the 90s.
Yes, we love those. We love those. Sometimes you see some really interesting and fun and funny commercials. I love that you also have a counter for certain things. Like if I see a cat or, if I see like some particular kind of product, like those are always really fun to react to. I love watching those. You also have a book too, right, Pat? That's coming out.
Oh, okay. You want me to talk more about myself?
Yeah.
I published two video game books. A third about the N64 library is coming out. The target is September.
Nice.
So yeah, I dabble in other things as well.
Awesome. That's awesome. Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you so much for your time. I definitely love how we've all, even just through this panel, have all connected through, some form of retro something, whether that's a game or like TV or I don't know, whatever it is. Like we all found a way to kind of just like have a conversation with each other and get to know each other a bit. So let's talk about those experiences and how they relate on Twitch or, whatever platform you create content on. So we play retro games, we look at magazines from the past, we react to commercials from previous decades. Why do you think these activities even draw an audience on Twitch, right? Because when you look at like the user base of Twitch, maybe it's sometimes, depending on the game, skews a little bit younger, but we've found like a space where, people of any age can enjoy retro things. So why do you think these activities draw an audience on Twitch? So I think I'm going to start with, Pat, let's start with you.
History in general is fun. I love history. I grew up loving American history classes, European history. I was that nerd that took like 3 different, AP history courses in high school, for example. To me, fact is stranger and more fun than fiction most of the time. And so I believe even if you didn't grow up in a generation that experienced some of the things that us older folks have experienced, you might still want to come to the table to learn about how the elders speak. And I believe I'm probably the elder of this chat, I think. And I think there's something to be said for like bridging across generations, even if it's a half generation. There's something to be said for how did someone that experienced an analog telephone, how did they live? How was their life versus mine? So I think that it's wanting a connection to something before us in some way, shape, or form.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You know what's funny? I went to Southern Fried Gaming Expo this past weekend, and they actually did have calculators and rotary telephones on display, and people were so fascinated with being able to use the rotary telephone to call their cell phone. I was like, what is going on?
Well, it's that understanding of things too. Like I say I'm a video game historian, but what I really want to be is a video game anthropologist, right? I want to study the past to learn how it can affect the future. It's that classic adage, those who don't know the history are doomed to repeat it.
Yeah.
And there are so many things where it's just like, oh, you can see that this happened once already, So how can we either prevent that from happening again, or what was the outcome of this? What was the conclusion? And like when watching this retro stuff, I think one, people love the stories of the people who were actually there for those moments. To not just get like that sterile kind of textbook version of like what it was like, but like to hear somebody's personal story of like seeing the difference between the 2D sprites of a Super Nintendo and the 3D of an N64, and being like, oh, I was in Toys R Us when I first saw the display, and there was
Mm-hmm.
literally nothing like it. Like hearing those personal stories is what really makes history come to life. And just like what Pat said, like I guess we're all cut from kind of the same cloth, because it's like when you love history, you don't want history to be boring. And so
Mm-hmm.
many people take history and make it boring when history is so interesting. And if you can package it in the right way, if you can make it humorous while people are learning something, so not only are they learning something, but then that laughter doesn't come from you just making fun of it, but because they have a better understanding of what they just learned about it, everybody walks away with something of value. And that's just a good time to have.
Oh my
Yeah.
God,
Stop.
that's so well
Stop
said.
having a boring history. Stop having a boring life.
Yeah. Yeah. Like it's so funny. And I think those kinds of things, it's important to get them on record, right? Let's just even think about what recently happened with all of the articles that were taken down from MTV's archives, right? Like, and
Yeah.
I
all
didn't
of
know
those
that.
stories, all of those like journalism, like all that journalism for like artists that were just coming out, and like, all of that, like, those thoughts about music of that time is gone. And if we didn't have things like Wayback Machine or the Internet Archive, that would be gone forever. So I think it's really cool, like you're saying, to like kind of live history in the moment. Like, for example, I had an AOL 6.0 disc and I did a TikTok video on it. And the comments of, oh my God, either I remember that or I never knew about that. That's the whole reason to do the video right there, right?
Yeah.
It's almost as
Absolutely.
if we have become teachers of history in a small way. And I never thought I would start off doing that. I started off doing goofy YouTube videos telling people about individual, 8-bit NES games. But I then started to realize as I did more videos about, for example, like a TurboGrafx 16 Christmas video I did in 2010,
Mm-hmm.
that's how some people learned about that console's existence. And so when I'm doing these streams every week, and a lot of my audience is younger than me, or almost all of them, and I'm telling them about how the 80s were, or even parts of the 70s, it's a history lesson, but it's also in like real time, and they're seeing examples of it being almost lived, even through, pop culture commercials and commercials of like old food and hotel chains and things like that. They're getting like this lived in feeling just by seeing these short snippets.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we're in a position where if we can almost like handhold people through that, I think it gets absorbed better in a way
Mm-hmm.
versus them like reading about, hey, this is how the mid 1980s were. I
Mm-hmm.
think there's something to be said for us explaining about, oh no, you don't understand. This is how it was. I was there, and I think it makes it more like I think Biz said more personal.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Well, and you
I
can
Yeah.
like stone soup it, right? Like that classic story where it's like everyone has an ingredient, but if they just put all the ingredients together, it becomes this delicious soup, right?
mm-hmm.
I don't like to think of myself as a trickster, but a lot of what I do on Twitch and in real life is, I don't want to say it's tricking, but it's like convincing people to either hang out or like talk about things that they normally wouldn't talk about, right? And it's like if you can just get the ball rolling, the first step is always the hardest. And
Mm-hmm.
when you play a commercial about like Howard Johnson having Game Gears, and all of a sudden somebody's like, "Oh my god, like we lived less than a mile from a Howard Johnson's and my mom still rented me a hotel room just so we could play the Game Gear for the weekend."
Mm-hmm.
Like hearing those little stories like just makes it so worth it. And then somebody shares that story and they're like, "Oh, I remember when this happened." And it's that awesome snowball effect of, core memories unlocked where people hear a jingle that they haven't heard for 20 years and they get to share that story. And And there's that commisery of people that are like, oh, I remember this stuff. And then people that are like, wow, you got to do that? That's cool. Even though it's like, it's just existing. All we are is a collection of our stories and like where we were. And so the fact that we get to share those moments and be a community about it is the reason that I do it. It makes us feel a little less alone to know
Yeah.
that it's like, oh crap, other people had these same kind of experiences, even though I couldn't find them to share with people at the time. I know that people are, having them at least. So that's
Right.
cool.
Yeah. And I always look at Twitch as like kind of like a third space for us to kind of get together and to like, we're going to the mall less, we're going out to like different places less, but we're like becoming a community online more. And also to, those first time experiences that you're talking about and those one thing that connected in my brain was how Duke, for example, plays like games that maybe people never streamed before ever. So maybe a video of it doesn't exist anywhere, right? Because that's like one of the things that you like to do is like find obscure games that maybe people have never played. Or like what Knight does is like first playthroughs of like, what was it, Adventure Island, where you played for 84 days because you didn't know a particular part of the game, like that
Yeah,
could have
and
made you
I kind of
easily
wanted
beat it?
to add in also, you guys talk about how history was being kept. There's also people re-experiencing what you guys went through as well. Like when I
Yes.
do first playthroughs and stuff, I'm going through the same thing that a lot of people who've played the game or seen or heard about the game. It's kind of like we were living it and re-experiencing it. And I think that also is a great way to, connect with people and just relive everyone's experiences they went through,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
You
To
know what
add
I
on
think
to
about?
that,
Well, go ahead.
to add on to that, one of the things that I like to do personally,
Yeah.
because I remember all of these games that like I would go to the mall and I would get the game and I would especially computer games. It was like a 40-minute drive each way to the mall. So 40 minutes in the car on the way back, I'm like looking at the manuals, I'm like looking at the discs and like the little registration card and all of this stuff. If I have access to that, I love to show that stuff on stream to show everybody like, here's all the stuff that came in the box. Or if I can't get it on stream, I'll like look up scans of it and make sure that those scans exist. One of the things that I'm super happy to do is that, like, for example, Tritorn Final, we didn't have proper scans of any of the stuff in here. We didn't have any of the like original discs. All the stuff that was out there was based on this unknown, like some Japanese dude might have edited the game to make it finishable back in the 90s. And that's the image that we have now. And so I love to do that, but I also love to like go all the way back and be like, if you got this game from the store the day it was released, what's that going to be like? Like Doom plays significantly differently on the first release than whatever you're going to play off of, GOG or something like that
Steam,
today.
yeah. Yeah.
So there's all these differences. I was playing Diablo 2. Diablo 2's release version right off the CD doesn't have rune words. It doesn't have all these extra like set armors. It doesn't have all this extra stuff. And so people were coming into chat and being like, "Oh, hey, did you do this thing?" And I'm like, "I can't."
Yeah.
And so it's interesting to go back and explore that. It's kind of like you were saying earlier about the like anthropology aspect of it. It's interesting to try to put yourself in the shoes of someone who is experiencing this stuff for the first time at the time. What resources would they have access to? We didn't have the internet back then. We didn't have a walkthrough for every game. We didn't have those luxuries of being able to make games easier and more accessible, which are great. Those are great resources, and it's not anything against those, but it's interesting to see like what was it like? And to be able to do that even for games that I never played, that I don't have personal nostalgia for. And there are some games that I have simply fallen in love with for the process of just playing them for the first time today, having gone through that process of like, what would this have been like?
Yeah.
What would it have been like to get this at that time? Would I have liked this when I was 13? Do I like it now?
Yeah.
It's really interesting to like just dig into that. And I think people really connect with that because it's a sense of wonder that people don't get in everyday life. and going back into history and giving a kind of safe way to approach that and to be vulnerable and to look at things in a way that you can experience that wonder, that almost childlike wonder again, it's so satisfying when you can really nail that. It's so cool.
Yeah, I
That's why I
think.
hate backseaters. Like,
Yeah.
backseaters,
Yep.
yeah, because, like, you know, especially with I love watching Metal Gear Solid first playthroughs because it's like I want to see somebody who doesn't know where to go at every second in the game. You know, I've been playing the game since it came out, so I can practically do it with my eyes closed now. And I hate that people, you know, forget that that suffering is part of it, right? You know,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
struggle to figure it out. It's not interesting when somebody just tells you the right answer right away. You have, like, part of the fun is to experiment to see how things work. And, you know, that led to one of the biggest skips being found in the game in recent speedrunning history because the person refused to have anybody tell them what to do. You
Yeah.
know, and because they were playing it their way, they ended up finding a skip that has now completely changed the makeup of the game. But it's like, you know, going back to what Duke was saying, yeah, if you're just starting a Twitch channel, like, play the games that people love that maybe you haven't played, because yeah, there's always a market for people that want to see somebody with fresh eyes go through something they love, right? Because I like to live vicariously through them because it's like I will never be able to experience this for the first time, but they are. So it's like if I ever know anybody's playing any of my favorite games, it's like, yo, I will mod for your channel. Like, you're playing Shadow of the Colossus, like, I will be your laser guided spoiler missile, because once you know, like, it's 13 puzzles, and once you know them, it's a completely different experience, right?
Yeah.
Like, if you know,
Yeah.
like, oh, go for this arm or something like that, like, it's the discovery and the ahas are so much a part of it that it's just like, why ruin that for somebody when you, it's like, yes, cool, you know how to do it, so many other people do, let this person figure it out, you know.
Yeah.
And it's so much more interesting watching how people figure it out than just seeing them do it because somebody told them how.
Yeah, it's like magic seeing the light bulb like shine in their brain. Like, oh my god! Like, no, thankfully nobody spoiled that Metal Gear boss for me, where I had to use a second controller and didn't
Psycho
know.
Mantis, yes.
No one spoiled
I
that for me. So yeah,
That's
I have
great.
I have I have an interesting story about that specifically that I think you'll appreciate. First time I played Metal Gear Solid, I didn't have a memory card, and it changed that scene and made that scene way more confusing. Because if you go in there with no memory card, it actually, like, it presents it a little differently, and so, like, the puzzle itself didn't make a lot of sense, and that's
yeah,
like that's my Metal Gear Solid memory.
yeah. All right.
So
Well,
if I ever play Metal Gear Solid on stream, I'm playing it without a memory card. I
yeah,
have to.
yeah, yeah. Well, it seems like the connecting thread for all of this, like, and experiences of why we do these things on Twitch is because we want to connect with people through maybe first time experiences. We want to give people the comfort of they're seeing something familiar, but they're reliving it again through a fresh eye. Or, you know, the comfort of knowing something is also a really great way to just make people feel like, oh, they're welcome in this space and we can share these things together. So I love that. So we're gonna move on to the second question. Thank you so much for all your great answers. Do you think audiences like seeing games and shows they already know and love, or do you think they like seeing your fresh reaction to classic content, or do you think there's a value in seeing games new to them that is similar to what they like? Which is more important to for do you think through the viewer perspective, which will kind of then lead how you create the content. So Duke, I'm gonna go with you on that first.
So I think they're all important. I think all three of those aspects are important, but they do kind of have a temporal relationship, right? I think that if you want to attract people to watch the things that you're doing, they're going to want to see things they already know. People are attracted to see stuff that they identify with, that they can look at and go, "Oh yeah, 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 I remember that." Right? They're going to get excited about things they know, right? And then once they're excited about that, once they get that vibe and they're like, "Yeah, this guy gets it. He knows what's going on his channel, and he's playing the game I like, and he's doing all the stuff that, like, oh, he found the thing," right? Like, they're gonna get really excited about you doing stuff that are secrets right? Things
Yeah.
that are known to them but secret to you, they're going to love that discovery process, right? And so that's the first step. That's often the introduction that people get is they're going to see you playing something they know. They don't know you, but they know what you're doing, so they're going to be interested and they're going to want to see that first, right?
Yeah.
Once you have people who are familiar with you playing their stuff, I think they'll actually want to see, they'll care about your opinion. They'll want to see your reaction to other classic content, maybe stuff that they know, maybe stuff they don't know. And
Mhm.
then the third is when they know your reactions to things, when they're familiar and comfortable with you and you show them something you like that's similar to what they like, they're going to really connect with that. They're going to go, I didn't know this game exists. This looks like game that I like, but different and cool. And you're gonna
Yeah.
be like, yeah, this is awesome. If you like that game, you're gonna love this game. So you can kind of like, there's this kind of flow to it that brings people through from like stuff they know, stuff they're excited about, to being excited about you and being excited about other things that you're gonna do, to you showing them something new to be excited about. And that kind of workflow, that roller coaster of emotion is really helpful in like building people up and making them excited to learn about new stuff. We see this a lot in retro content, that there's a kind of predisposition to be a little bit negative about some stuff, right? The
Mhm.
people are like, "Oh, look at this old game where they didn't know how to make the game right." And it's like, "Yeah, but look at how cool that background is. Look at how like
Yeah.
feel how great it is. Like
Yeah.
that just the jump in this game is amazing. The
Yeah.
rest of it's all kind of messed up, but there's something good here. Like I'm a huge proponent of the game Deadly Towers
Yeah.
because that game is a game design masterpiece. It is unbelievably well designed, and the way that it's put together on the hardware that it uses in terms of the mapper and stuff is really really impressive. And a lot of people came in when I was playing it and like learning this. I didn't know this. I played it as a meme and I thought people are going to be like, I thought, it's not going to be as bad as people say. It'll be fine. It'll be middling. And then I looked at it from a game design perspective. I didn't mention earlier, like I have a history in the games industry. And I looked at it from a game design perspective. I was like, this game is really, really smart
Yeah.
for a game of what, like 86 on the
Yeah.
NES? Like
Yeah.
it came out around the same time as like Zelda 1 and Metroid.
Yeah.
And that's really impressive for all the stuff that it does. The like 8-directional movement, the way the overworld is set up. There's all this cool stuff about it, but it gets buried under like, I don't like the intro song and the game's really hard, right?
Yeah.
And so a lot of people are like, oh, Deadly Towers is just a total crap game, and it's like, actually, there's a lot to like there. And the people coming in to watch me play it at that time, when they were like, wow, actually, yeah, that's kind of cool. I never thought about that. That's the biggest thing to me, is like changing somebody's opinion from negative to positive about a retro game or about a piece of media or something like that. That's just that's one of the best feelings, honestly.
I
And so
love
it's
that.
great to have that opportunity to do that through that kind of like, you know, get them comfortable with what they know and that you like what they know. Show them some different stuff and then show them something new.
Yeah.
Right? And that's like that's my opinion on that. Like
That's kind of
So,
how
you
I
know-
feel
So if I-
about that's kind of how I feel about Draken on Super Nintendo.
So if I may add on to what Duke was saying there, this has always been like when I was first starting to get partnered, I was always told focus on one game, and build up an audience around that game, and then once you're partnered, you can play whatever you want. And I was like, that always seemed so backwards to me. Like, why would I build up an audience around one specific thing when I don't want to stay in that one specific thing? And doing that one specific thing for me would be torture, right? Like that seems like a job to me if I'm just playing the same game over and over and over. And so here's my secret to Twitch, right? That I
Yeah.
would tell everybody.
Yeah.
People should not come to your channel to see the game that you're playing. They should be coming to see you playing that game. Right?
absolutely.
It doesn't matter what you're playing. It's like, oh, if people know that you're a scaredy cat and you're playing a horror game, it's like, oh, I can't wait to see what happens when they get to this moment in this game. Or if you know the person's really funny and they're playing, Discworld with Terry Pratchett, you can't wait to see how they react to this joke, right? So it shouldn't matter what you're playing, how you react to it. It should matter. And like I always tell, especially new streamers, do not play a brand new game on launch, because there's a couple things that are working against you. Number one, people want to play the game themselves, right?
Yeah.
Number
Yeah.
two, they're not going to go to somebody brand new who they don't know and don't care about their opinion on to see their opinion on a brand new game. If they're going to watch somebody, they're already going to watch somebody whose opinion they know aligns with them, and they value their opinion already. So that's a really great time to play something that people can go to that, say they don't have the money for the game or don't want the game spoiled to them. If you're playing like something classic like Super Metroid, that's something that everybody's looking for, right? So, play that classic stuff, especially when you're just starting off, because you have so many more people that aren't going to be spoiled by it, that are excited to see people playing it for what might potentially be your first time, and find those reasons why you're excited to play those games, like the way that Duke talks about them and can shape people's opinions. It's the same way that I talk about certain things, where it's like, maybe you shouldn't be so hard on this, because I'm tired of like the red letter media mindset of things. I'm tired of being the hypercritical. I want to
Yeah.
find reasons that I love things, and care about things, more than reasons that I think this is garbage, right?
Yeah.
Even going back, like playing these old movie games that it's like that I thought I would just play to hate. It's like, number one, some of them are awesome, and then number two, it's like, yeah, it's like maybe this didn't work, but you can see how this laid the groundwork. Without Jurassic Park Trespasser, we don't get Half-Life 2, right? So like being able to see Jurassic Park Trespasser for what it is in all its janky glory is important, because you see how it then inspired other people to take it and fix what was wrong with it or improve upon it, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Am
Like
I
it's
am I
I watched
remembering this
some
correct?
Go ahead, dude. Go ahead.
Am I remembering this correctly? Didn't didn't the guy who made Trespasser went on to like make the Xbox? Without Trespasser, we wouldn't have the Xbox.
Ooh, I don't
I'm
know.
not sure about that one. Chat,
Yeah.
research
Yeah.
it. But yeah,
Yeah.
Valve loved it and like saw like the physics-based puzzles in it, and we're like, that's what we're gonna do for Half-Life 2, and we all know how that turned out, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny, like I watched someone play Bratz on the Wii the other day, and I was like, this is actually a good game, but like, sometimes we look at stuff like that, like you said, like the movie games or like some of the other games, and just like kind of write them off if it's not like a Mario or Sonic or whatever. But you're totally right. Like, it's so cool to like see the people like experiment and try different things, and then like then form an opinion on it. Like, one thing I really love was why I watch Pat's channel too, is like there's some of these commercials and stuff that I've never seen, and just seeing Pat's reaction because he's seen them before or kind of knows what to expect makes it like we're like watching TV together, and it's like really fun and funny to be like, oh my god, remember this Burger King commercial or whatever. Like, I don't know, it just reminds me of that.
I
I think there's
I,
something to
I
be said for a shared learning experience. Going back to, I guess, the heart of the question about a fresh reaction to content, and I don't stream games often, so my content is more like sort of a roulette of what you're going to come up with on the fly every 30 seconds or every minute. And so it's a chance for everyone to either experience it new, especially if you didn't grow up in the 80s or 90s or 70s, or have it explained to someone who grew up with it, or at least is so amazed by what they're seeing that you can research it and learn together in real time. And my audience has gotten to the point where almost on cue they will be researching things as we are discovering them, whether they are old TV shows that were like, hey, how long did this last, a season or two, and then the lore will come down in the chat.
Yeah.
Or we'll watch say a political campaign from like 82, and we'll find out, hey, did that person win the senate the senator job or not? Or the same with like
Yeah.
newscasts, hey, what happened to that story? So it's almost as if you're back in that time, And so it's almost like it's sort of like you're living in the moment. It's kind of fresh, depending upon what you're watching, and so I think it's unique. It's definitely different versus when I do the game because yeah, they want to experience like when you're playing a game like playing say an NES game, and even if you haven't experienced it before, you're still along for that ride of okay. You're going to go through the same pitfalls as a lot of us did if you didn't know about it. And I think there's value to that. I'm not sure who brought up it. It might have been Duke or Biz about, hey, you maybe want to see someone experience it again for the first time because like you will never be able to again. Like
Yeah.
it's one and done for me playing Super Mario Brothers and discovering, how to jump on the Goomba correctly. That's it for me. I experienced it when I was 7, and that's it. So I think that's a lot of the draw as well.
Yeah. Knight. I know Knight plays a lot of games without looking at the manual, no hints, no nothing. Everything is completely fresh. How does your audience react to seeing you play a game for the very first time, knowing absolutely zero about it?
They really enjoy it because they get to see me like make discoveries. They get to see how I think and approach things because when I go and do these first playthroughs, I know nothing. I have no context going into it with zero nothing. And one of the big draws to it is that, like you guys have been saying, is that people they get to relive experiences and what they went through and how I approach things. And a lot of times when I do these first playthroughs or I'm figuring out the deathless playthroughs, is that I have a different perspective. So like maybe the way they play Mario or they go a certain route, or for example, Castlevania, they um, attempt differently than I would have. And I think that's the fun part about it too, is that you learn every time someone plays the game because everybody has a different perspective and everybody's gonna have a different approach. And it's just like that nostalgia cycle just keeps going every time.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of fun, and I think people enjoy watching reactions and experiences um, because it's always fresh for them.
Yeah. And they also love the R Night music too. CD coming out soon.
That's true. I make up songs.
Okay, so with all that being said, we're gonna move on to the next question. How do you think these nostalgic experiences strengthen your relationship with your audience? And I'm gonna start with Pat this time.
Well, nostalgia is longing for something that you experienced before that you want to go back to, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, so you're already starting off with a longing in some sense, whether you grew up in the 80s or 90s, you want to watch, let's say, either see these games you grew up with and play along with it, or see these commercials. In my case, of things you grew up with, whether they were toys, whether there was cartoons, overly sugary cereals that should not have been marketed to kids that were allowed once you got to the 80s, things like that. So you already have this. You all have the same goal. You want to either experience what someone else did or learn about what someone else went through me explaining these things as I rewatching these things on the fly. So I think there's something said for that. You basically are all on the same path in some sense. It's all learning on some level. It's obviously fun, or else people wouldn't want to watch you go through it. And so I think that's where a lot of it comes from. And there are emotional experiences that come up when I'm watching either something really happy. I remember I saw you might remember this, Ash, and I forget the name. They ran this commercial for about 10, 15 years, New York, New Jersey. It was for a summer camp with a smiley face logo. They
Mm-hmm.
ran it in the summers all the time, and I hadn't seen that commercial since I was like 8 years old,
Yeah.
probably.
Yeah.
One of those day camp commercials, and it showed up in one of my, and I was like, wow, I'm like 7, 8 years old again, seeing this commercial, during my summer vacation, and it just hit me. Then we looked up, the history of that summer camp. We find out it's still around in like New York and like Long Island, and I'm like, this is amazing to me. But there's also like emotional, sad things that we encounter.
Yeah.
I remember there was like a little news blurb about the Challenger disaster in
Mm-hmm.
'86 that happened, and so I had to explain it to people. There's people in the chat that had no idea what that was,
Mm-hmm.
about the shuttle going up in the atmosphere, and
Yep.
the death of several astronauts, and how that was like, that was really bad for the U.S. when that happened, and everyone went through it, and kids were watching it live in classrooms on TV. So there's a history again that gets transferred over, and that does strengthen a bond in some weird way. Even if you're not seeing other people's reaction in the chat, they're having an emotional reaction, again, happy or sad at the same time, and that's a
Yeah.
lot of what this experience is.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I totally felt something yesterday when we saw the commercial for the Snapple lady. Cause like I grew up with the Snapple lady, and I was
Snapple
like, well,
lady.
where did she go? Where did she go, Pat?
Oh,
Yeah.
someone in the chat answered that, and it's surprising. I don't want to spoil it. You can look it up.
Okay, I gotta look it up. I gotta look it up. But you're right. Like, it totally I was like, yo, I forgot about that. But then it was like, I instantly took me back to when I remember seeing those commercials on TV. So yeah, how do you think these nostalgia experiences strengthen your relationships with things like maybe playing some retro games, or like, I know for me personally, right? Like, when I pull out, like, for example, one of my Amiga boxes, right? And then somebody is like, "Oh my God, I had that game," or "I still have that game," or "I remember that box." Like, I love showing things off, especially in my collection, that'll be like, "Yo, it sparks a memory," or it's like, "That was one of my favorite games. Let's go ahead and play it because I haven't played it in like 20 years. I haven't thought about this thing in like 20 years."
Yeah, I definitely think, like, you hold up a controller of the NES. A lot of memories go for people, and they think about different things. Like you said, commercials, images, media, just a lot of it. I think it takes us back to a time or a certain moment, and we revisit it. And the great thing about what we can do now is that it's on the internet. So we can share these things. We can share these stories. Like, oh, if you even talk about, like, old TV shows, you might have memories of sharing, of watching it with your family, or maybe that's mom's favorite show or dad's favorite show. Oh, we used to watch this, and you hear it in
Yes.
the background, and there's just that connection that just reeks, and it's a powerful thing, and I think that's why we always come back looking for it.
Yeah.
Anytime there's a DVD, like a re-edition of a show, or there's a reboot that comes out. Oh, the Power Rangers reboot, it's coming in. Will it be good as the old one? I don't know.
Yeah.
So, like, I think that's a very powerful thing, nostalgia. It never stops.
I think also, what's cool too is the way that these experiences are also shaping like modern games. Like, for example, Ninja Turtles Shredder's Revenge. Like, you talking about Turtles just reminded me, like, they made that new beat 'em up game that's very much in the style of the classic Ninja Turtles beat 'em ups games, but they're trying to recapture the essence of that, right? Like the new Double Dragon Gaiden, right? That's another,
Yeah.
like, there's a
Yeah.
ton of indie games that are coming out now that are pixel, low poly, but feel like maybe an NES or a Game Boy game or a classic DOS point and click adventure game, that now, like, they're making it new, but it will still connect to people who love this kind of stuff.
The homebrew community is like, so I live in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, which is home of the Midwest Gaming Classic, and let me tell you, the homebrew scene currently is absolutely insane. People making games specifically for either Nintendo or Super Nintendo, Sega, TurboGrafx. Like, people are now making modern games within the confines of those old systems and programs. And kind of what Mer Knight was talking about with, like, shows and reissues. Like, I have always been a behind the scenes kid,
Yeah.
right? Like, when I got my collection of Star Wars tapes, it came with that 4th tape, which was from Star Wars to Jedi, which showed you all the behind the scenes making of the movies. And in kindergarten, I drew the picture of myself behind the camera shooting Darth Vader, because, like, I always loved the behind the scenes stuff, and I thought it was so cool how these shocking how the puppets were, like, brought to life, like the Jabba the Hutt puppet, and seeing 4 people working together to make this giant thing come to life, if only for like a couple minutes, was just so cool.
Yeah.
And so for me, it's like, yeah, it's cool seeing it on screen, but, like, for me, knowing how it works and knowing the insides of it is like just as cool, right?
Yeah.
And so that there still really isn't that market because video game development was like kept in the dark for so long, and people weren't allowed to talk about how they made their games because they didn't want their codes being stolen and stuff like that. That now that we are finally getting books by people like John Romero and other
Mm-hmm.
people that design these games, now us as the people who took the time to read those books can watch a Doom commercial and talk about how John Romero and John Carmack actually solved this, the side-scrolling issue because they made a bootleg version of Super Mario Brothers 3. And like that's a super cool, interesting fact that a lot of people don't know, and that's what inspired them to make Commander Keen, right? And
Wow.
so it's just like, the fact that now I can be the person to share some of this information with people and get it out there and make it more readily available is just as cool as like learning that like, oh, they used a piece of railroad track and a train car with the baby alien to make it run across the table in
Wow.
Alien, right?
That is so cool. Yeah. Yeah. You
It's
know
that
that
behind the scenes magic. Yeah.
that reminds me too of the fact that like I don't want people to just fixate on the fact that nostalgia has to be us playing like a old school game or us watching like an old thing or reading an old book. It could also be exactly what you're saying. Like Fractal Mind Mike, who's in the chat right now, and Duke Donuts has streamed themselves making and building a video game, and it had that retro look, that retro vibe, right? And then with all us within the retro community, we're all playing each other's game. And that's another way, like maybe it's like we're creating like a new thing, but we're still using exactly like what you're talking about now, decoding that way of building a game, but using, like those tools that they used like in the past to create new experiences. So I love that you brought that up.
Yeah, it's something. It's actually something I've been thinking about a lot lately. That we think about nostalgia and we think back to these kind of happy times that we've had in the past, and we try to kind of compare our current day to those times. And there's a trick of the memory, right? That like
Yeah.
when you think of something good in the past, it's really easy to think of only the good of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's easy to think of how happy a time it was back then and to discard kind of the difficulties and the reality of the situation you might have been in. But what's one of the most powerful things we have today is when you take a moment and you step back in your mind from what's happening at that very moment and you think, this is it. I'm in tomorrow's happy memory.
Mm-hmm.
This is going to be something I have nostalgia for. This is something I'm going to think back on, and I'm just going to smile so big because I remember this.
Yeah.
And we only start to get that once we understand the idea of nostalgia. Once we understand that, like, yes, what we're looking at is something that we like because we were there at a time, but then we can realize, like, we're here at this time, and like I'm gonna look back at this panel and I'm gonna be like, that was awesome. Yeah.
Oh,
And
thanks.
so right now I'm like, hell yeah, this is great. This is amazing because we're in that happy memory that we're gonna have tomorrow and 10 years from now
Yeah.
and 20 years from now. And
It's
we're going
like-
to look back and be like, yeah, that was awesome. Remember when Twitch was like that? Remember when we did this stuff? And it's different now, but that was such a great time.
Yeah.
And it's such a great time right now.
Yeah.
So
It's
it's really incredible to have that realization. I only understood that very recently.
Yeah, yeah,
It's
yeah.
wild.
See,
It's
that's where
wild
I've
to
been very
Yeah.
lucky. It's like
come to
the
that.
internet has always been a tool to connect like-minded people, so we feel a little less alone. And
Yeah.
you used to like have to work, to get onto the internet. So it's like if you were on the internet looking for people, like you knew that these other people were like serious about it because like they had made it onto the internet at this point. But like that is I've always had these anxieties of like trying to connect with people. I'm an 86 baby, but like I grew up in that weird time period where like kids my age did not like Star Wars.
Yeah.
Like the special editions had not come out. Like you could not buy Star Wars toys in theater or in toy stores. Like I remember being at Toys R Us in 1994 when the first Kenner box of 1994 figures dropped, but like trying to talk about Star Wars to other kids in my class, it was like nobody knew what I was talking about.
Yeah.
And so like the fact that I could get those one or two other kids excited about it. It was always important to me, right? It was always
Yeah.
like, like, hey, check out this thing that came before us because it's going to shape things to come as well. And then it wasn't, until the special editions came out that like Star Wars really became part of that pop culture again. But it's, it's always weird to see how things change and people forget those things, like
Yeah.
growing up with Metal Gear Solid 2, and like I saw a Reddit post being like, did people really hate Raiden as much as they say? It's like, oh, you better believe it. But like now with the gift of hindsight, nobody hates Raiden because they understand. But it's like, yeah, if you weren't there in the moment, you don't understand that. And if you can't properly explain, like, hey, we saw trailer after trailer that was like almost the entirety of Snake's section, only to then when we finally get past that to be playing as this other weird character, people don't understand that context. So providing that context is important.
Yeah. That's like how
I'll
people
push.
go ahead, Pat.
I'll push back slightly because I was born 6 years before Biz. Star Wars was always big for us kids growing up in the 80s.
Oh yeah.
For you probably just missed out because like when I was like 5 or 6, it was just showing up like on USA Network would show it and things like that. And so like I actually collected Star Wars toys as a teenager before the revival, like in the mid
all
90s.
all
So
my toys came from rummage sales. Like we would just go to rummage sales and look for the LFL on feet because yeah, there was nothing. Like if you wanted a t-shirt, it was like the double XLs at comic book shops. Like there were no
nice.
kid t-shirts, there were no toys. Like it
Yeah.
was it was a dark time for that younger Star Wars
It was
fans.
it was like teenagers. They were marketing towards with like once you got to the early 90s, they had all the Star Wars video games come back. They were
Yeah.
gearing up. But yeah,
Zahn! Yeah.
yeah, kids sort of got lost until you got to the Power of the Force figures in the mid 90s, and it was like, okay, now we got toys again.
Yeah. Yeah.
That is a different podcast because I could talk about Star Wars toys for absolutely ever.
I'm pretty sure I
It's
have a
interesting.
Salacious Crumb on my desk somewhere.
You have an original
interesting.
Salacious Crumb?
Yeah, I'm pretty
little guy?
sure. Yeah, the little guy. Yeah.
The Jabba the Hutt playset. Very nice.
Yeah.
But yeah,
It's-
just finding those connections online and then being able to either roll them into real life connections is important. Just having that, like with the MGS con, it's like everybody came together because they all loved Metal Gear Solid, but hopefully they found some friends now because they could at least feel comfortable talking because they knew everybody in the room at least was on the same page as them, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
I think it's interesting, like in the context both of like the Star Wars story and the kind of stuff that we do like with all kinds of different retro content. It's interesting to see that kind of ebb and flow and that curve of like there's like the initial popularity, acceptance, cultural phenomena, and then it falls off, and there's that trough, right? And you'll see that in games, right? In retro games, you'll see people go, "Oh, the PS3 isn't retro because I don't have nostalgia for it." They'll go,
Yeah,
"Xbox
definitely.
360, that can't be retro." But the, Game Boy Advance, DS, they're like, "Oh yeah, retro stuff." Because it
Mhm.
looks a certain way, because it feels a certain way to them. And yet, you go play PS3 or Xbox 360 on Twitch, and a bunch of people will come in and they'll be like, "Holy shit, this is my childhood. I remember this game."
Yes.
Because that was, what, 10 years ago, 15
It's what their
years
parents
ago almost at
had.
this point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting to see these these things happen and kind of progress in real time. And like when I started on Twitch, people wouldn't think that the PlayStation 1 was retro.
Yep.
And now the PlayStation 2 is well in retro territory.
Yep.
And it's interesting to see that ebb and flow where it's like you see that in like used game prices where it's like for a while PS2 games were super cheap and now they're getting really expensive because that's where the nostalgia is going and that's where people are willing to spend their money and they're like more successful as they get to this point in their lives and careers. to understand that, right? But it's interesting to see how that can influence your connection with viewers, right?
Yeah.
That like when you're business said earlier, the idea of playing just one game, if you're playing games from different eras and you're seeing this stuff for the first time, maybe like me, I missed out on most of the PS2 generation. And I still have nostalgia for the games that I played, but I'm excited to explore that library and see those games for the first time. And it's great when people come in and they go like, "Oh, I had this game. I love this game. This game's awesome. You're gonna really love this game." And I'm playing it for the first time because I missed that era.
Yeah.
I was busy working a job and drinking.
Yeah. 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 And you know what? I love the fact that you brought up that the retro side is always growing. Like when you first started PS1, people were like kind of shaky, but now it's like, okay, no, that's definitely retro. And now PS2 is like definitely retro because obviously as time goes on, the further away we get from those release dates, the more will become retro. And I think that's a good segue into our next question of how do you keep things fresh with your audience? And I think one way is definitely the fact that the library of retro is always growing. So the things that you can pull from is always growing. So how do you think keep things fresh for your audience? I'm going to start with our night. How do you do that?
Yeah. When thinking about this question, I was reading earlier, there's just so many schools of thought to go about this. I mean, you could start basic with like a video game, right? Everyone may have played Mario before, but it's like, how do you keep it interesting? So there's like so many different ways you can go about it to make it fresh. For my audience, a lot of it is like first playthroughs, and we started doing, challenges and stuff. But if you look in the bigger bubble of things, there's so many ways to go about it. You could speedrun the game. You could beat the game without taking any damage. I mean, just recently, I think it was Slackinator that beat Ninja Gaiden without any damage at all.
Wow.
And it's like something always new is happening. Or there's things like randomizers, or there's mods. And there's just so many different things. Like business, you talked about homebrews, creating new things similar in, with these games. And so I think with keeping things fresh, it depends on the personality and the person, right? So I think there's just so many different ways to go about this. Like, for example, speedrunning. Why do people enjoy speedrunning? They've seen the game 100 times. What makes it interesting? And I think there's another element I think some people don't really think about. It's storytelling.
Yes.
What keeps them watching? What is it? For example, like if I'm doing like a deathless challenge. Geez, Knight is on the 20th day of this challenge. Where is he? Is he going to do anything today? Is this going to be a dud? Is this going to be a good run today? Or you watch speedrunners, right? Oh, they're going for a world record. They're going for a goal.
Yeah.
And I think that's another element that really helps keep things fresh for people, especially with retro stuff. It's really what's the goal, what's the attachment, and what are the elements that can go along with it. And I think that just is a good way to always keep things fresh.
Yeah. I would say one thing that I started doing recently, I just got a Sony Handycam from the 90s, and I took it to the last convention I went to, and I recorded everything that I did, walking the floor, looking at the pinball machines. And that's a new experience that has a retro flair now, because the way that the Sony Handycam filmed, it has that grain, that 90s look. You know what I mean? But I'm going to create a new video using that, but it still has that nostalgic feel. So that's definitely another tool you can utilize. Like
ancillary things like video toaster for that. Video toaster. Use a video toaster.
Yes.
Video toaster. Wow.
And yeah, some of my favorite videos are the, E3, where it's just like people walking the E3 floor and like looking at all the different booths and like hearing the reactions to people being like, "Oh my God, it's never going to look better than this," and stuff like that. But getting back to what Knight was saying, and I tell this to people in my improv classes as well when I'm talking about streaming, is like, you can play the game the right way, or you can play the game your way. And we say this in, improv games as well. There's the game within the game, right? So you can always find a different way to do things. So like maybe like all of the costumes in a game are really detailed. So for that night, you're like a fashion critic. And so you're like judging everybody's outfits, and then all of a sudden all of a sudden your chat is noticing the outfits a little bit more, and they're like, oh, look at that guy's ascot, and you're like, oh, that is a very nice ascot, let's take a look at that a little bit closer, and that becomes the game for the night. Or like, you're making a pun about like how you're killing people Arnold Schwarzenegger style, and like all of a sudden your chat is like feeding you puns to go off of, and that becomes the game for the night. So like, you don't have to play the games the way that they intended you to play them. Maybe, there was once I was like playing Elden Ring, I was like, oh, this is definitely an invisible wall. And every wall I hit, I was just with 100% confidence, I was like, this is the one. This is going to be the invisible wall, and it never happened, but like, people were like, oh, what about this one? And it became a thing that people were excited about and changed it. Same thing what Pat was saying about like researching people in videos, right? It's like wild learning, like, oh, JD Roth, the guy who like hosted this weird video game TV show, game show, also went on to create The Biggest Loser, and make like tons of money from it, which is really weird and stupid. Or just like, yeah, you research somebody and you find out like, oh my God, they actually went on, the guy who played, James in this weird video went on to like be in the Book of Mormon on Broadway. Like, it becomes that fun of like, oh, we have this aha moment together. Like, we all learn something new together. And like, especially if it's a chat member, with improv, we would always ask for suggestions, because the moment you include the audience, it makes the audience feel like they're on your level. And that's why I love Twitch in general, is that, we can interact with Mind Mike and all of those people and like include them on it. And when you can include them, that's what that's what creates community. It's like, oh, I've literally known Knight. He was like probably one of my first 100 followers. He came up like, hey, are your followers called The Family Business? And I was like, why, yes, Knight, they are now. And I've always given him credit for that, because like, that's what community
Thanks,
does.
Biz.
And we always remember each other. And like, those are the moments that shape and strengthen those bonds and connections on this platform, which is really cool. The fact that we've known each other for 9 years and have been friends this long, it's awesome.
Yeah,
brings a
I
tear to
agree with
my
you,
eye.
Biz.
I love that. I love that so much. That is amazing.
I was gonna say on that point, especially the thing about research. One of the things that I've found really interesting is like a lot of, I see that happen a lot with games, and like especially the staff of games, because you
Mhm.
look at like who published a game. A lot of times you go, oh, this is a Konami game. Oh, this is an Acclaim game, and you think like, oh, that's who it was. Then you find out like, actually, wait, this was actually developed by these people, or like we don't know. We don't know to
Yeah.
this day. We don't know who developed Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles for the NES.
Really?
Really?
Wait a minute.
We don't know.
I gotta check my book.
As far as I know, we know it was a team at Konami. We know it was not certain people who were assigned to other projects at the time, but there's no
Okay.
there's no positive identification for anyone who worked on it.
Yeah.
Okay, so we know it's Konami, but we don't know it within Konami. Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah. We don't know which team. We don't know what developers. We only know the composer, and they're uncredited.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
A lot of yeah.
So-
To Finn's point, a lot of devs did use fake names, because I think I was
Yep.
doing research on another show, and they were like, they would use fake names so that they wouldn't get poached, or some nonsense like that. Some weird
They just
like.
they
That was one
literally,
of the
yeah, the
things.
Yeah,
company
it was-
would not let them in some
Yep.
cases. Like Sonic 2 notoriously has a black text on black screen because the developers wanted technically credit, and Sega wouldn't let them get credit because they were afraid that other companies would try to steal them from them. So yeah, they just, in a lot of cases, they weren't allowed to take credit for it. And it
Nuts.
sucks. And that's why, as more finally people are like, I don't care anymore, I'm gonna talk about it. Like, that's why I think it's
Yeah.
important for people like us to finally be able to be like, oh no, like these people did work on this game, like here is them talking about it now. Because yeah, for a lot of years they just weren't allowed to do it. And like, it's the same thing that happened in the movie industry, like they
Mhm.
used to just keep people so locked down that like actors worked for studios. You know, they didn't pick the project, they picked the studio, and then we're stuck with that studio. And yeah, when there's no oversight and people aren't unionized, which shout outs to all of the companies unionizing and people going on strike to keep their jobs, because video games should be made by people. Computers should be tools to help make them, but not how you make the voices or the levels.
Yep.
They should be tools to assist people.
Yep.
But they are made by people, and people definitely, especially right now, should not be replaced by robots. So, yeah.
Yep. Say
As you're talking Super Nintendo.
Hey,
Waiting
I'm
for someone to say
full powered,
it.
okay? I'm
I was
crafting
waiting.
here.
I was waiting.
Yeah, ghost in a shell. Ghost in a shell.
Oh my gosh.
I was going to say, one of the things on that topic, though, with regard to the developers, that I find really interesting is when you find this like through line of like, hey, this person worked on this, and then they worked on this. Like we were talking about Seamus Blackley earlier, and his role in Trespasser and the birth of the Xbox. But there's also like there's this series of like MS DOS and Windows games that goes all the way back to this one game called Master Ninja Shadow Warrior of Death that was released in like '86. And from there, these two guys who were the primary dudes on this one game, they went off and they like went into different companies, and like most of the games that they worked on, they were extremely prolific in actually getting games done and released, and most of the games that they worked on don't have particularly good reputations. And so it's this interesting thing that it's like, I see people going through these different games and like, oh yeah, I found this cool game, and I'm like, oh, I hope you enjoy it. I hope you find something to enjoy in that game. And it's interesting to see these things. It's also like on Super Nintendo, you've got Skulljagger, Revolt of the Westicans, and Power Pigs of the Dark Ages.
Yeah.
That are both like connected by this investment company that like wanted to start these cartoon projects, and they decided that making a Super Nintendo game was the place to start. And it's nuts like that. Those like connections, because you play the two games and you're like, these games are like similarly weirdly kind of crappy, but like they're also like weirdly similar, but like the development teams weren't the same. What happened here?
Yeah,
so
and
it's
then
interesting
that's
to, like,
why.
dig into that and
Yeah.
see that kind of stuff happening like almost in real time, making those discoveries as you play a game or as you like watch a commercial or something like that. That kind of connection is really powerful, because it's easy to make that connection. It's easy to involve chat in it. It's easy to get people, like, somebody's going to go off and look up this thing or that thing, and they're like, hey, I found this page that says this, and it's like, it's really interesting to see that information kind of get filled in real time while you're streaming. That's one of the things about streaming that's amazing.
It's awesome.
Is having that kind of opportunity to do that live, right?
Yeah. And I think that's a great segue into our next question, which is, describe a time where sharing nostalgic experiences taught you or your audience something new, right? Because you're basically talking about how you learn stuff together with your audience through like maybe discovering, why do these games kind of feel the same kind of crappy and I can't put my finger on it? But Pat, could you tell us about a time where describing, nostalgic experiences taught you or your audience something new?
I mean, every time I stream, there's something new we discover, whether it's a new cereal we didn't know existed, or a movie. We see like a movie commercial. You see a news bulletin. We see like a light beer commercial, and it's like they put the name of the athlete. I'm like, I never heard of that athlete. Was he a Hall of Famer? Was he just a popular person in the area? But I have an example, show and tell. I'm going to show you the hat since I'm in love with it. So this was a beloved snack that was lost to the annals of time. And I thought about it for decades, but did not ever remember the name until we saw a commercial.
Okay.
And we all brainstormed, and it is Peanut Butter Boppers. And this is a hat that came out back then. Peanut Butter Boppers was only around for about 3.5, 4 years between the mid to late 80s by Nature Valley. Mm-hmm. And they were peanut butter rolls, and like they were like almost like rolled in like crunchy stuff. So picture like just like the most delectable peanut butter sort of candy snack food ever.
Okay.
And so like we looked into it, and it was like there's online, there's people trying to get them brought back to the market. On General Mills's website, there's now a recipe to get people to make them in their own homes. There's like this love of this snack that hasn't been seen since the late 80s. And I didn't remember the name for decades until I saw the commercial, and like we just brainstormed and we researched it all. And now I want to buy every piece of merchandise that exists for this like esoteric snack that doesn't exist anymore, called peanut butter boppers.
Oh my God. I just looked it up and oh my God, it looks so good.
It's magical. I mean, if you never had it, it's magical. I can still almost taste them. So yeah, so that's my thing. Peanut butter boppers.
I love that. That makes me remember 3D Doritos. Do you all remember 3D Doritos?
Yep.
Of course. Of course I remember 3D
Oh
Doritos.
my
Yeah.
gosh. Please bring
My-
those
my-
back.
My go-to for that is the stupidest thing, the Bell Beefer.
What?
Wait, what?
The Bell Beefer. Remember the Taco Bell menu item that was basically like a hamburger bun with taco meat on it?
No. I do not
What?
remember the Bell Beefer.
Was that
No.
maybe you think it's a regional
I'm not
thing?
making this up. I'm
The
not
Bell-
making this
wait
up.
Now I have to know.
For a
I think
brief
Del
time in,
Taco
like,
still
the-
offers that.
for a brief time in the late 80s, Taco Bell offered, it was basically all the taco stuff but on a hamburger bun, and it was called
Nice.
the Bell Beefer, which is the stupidest name, and I
Yes.
love it.
It looks
Wow.
like it looks kind of like a sloppy Joe, but in a burger
Yeah,
form.
It's
I was
like
gonna say
Yeah.
it's almost Joe.
it's like a taco flavored sloppy Joe.
Okay,
We need
I
a
really
photo of
want them.
this.
Yes, I want them to bring this back now. I really want them to bring this back now. But there have
Bell
been
Beefer.
times.
No,
There have been
they
times
need to
when
bring
like
back the double decker first.
yes, oh my gosh, yes. Oh my gosh. There was like do y'all remember that Snapple rain and fire drink, and like they had like all these element drinks, and then they brought them back like for like a year. Do y'all remember that?
Yeah, they had the ears one too.
Yes. See, Moo
I
remembers.
remember that one.
Yes, it was like okay, so it was like a drink, and it was kind of like around the time when they had that Orbits drink too, where it was like, you
Oh,
know,
I was just
like-
gonna talk about Orbits.
Yes,
Yeah, with the
yes.
little red dots in it.
Yes. Oh my gosh, yes. And Fruitopia, it was like all around that time. That
Oh,
it just made me.
Fruitopia. Oh my.
We had
God.
Fruitopia vending machines in my high school.
Yeah.
There was a group of kids that used to rib me and my friends very playfully as we would come in every day. And my friend had bright red shoes, and I'll never forget him. One of the ribs being Fruitopia boot wearing. Like we all were like, that is very accurate because the red of his shoes was very much the same red as like a Fruitopia fruit punch rib. We're like, that's fair. That is fair.
Oh my gosh.
I remember when Fruitopia was like at the height of its popularity. I was working at what was the name of that place? I was working at the special effects studio for Doug Trumbull, the guy who did like 2001 and a bunch of other
Oh
stuff.
wow.
And they had Fruitopia there, and like I for whatever reason I was just sitting there at the lunch table and I was reading it. And I was like, I noticed that it had cochineal in it for color. That's
Yeah.
what gave it that like bright red. And cochineal is like, it's these tiny little cactus bugs. And I was like, that's kind of messed up. Like I imagine vegetarians and vegans don't know about this and would be a bit upset if they found out. And one of the guys that worked there was a vegan, and he was like, "What?" I was like, "Yeah, it's got cochineal in it." He's like, "Well, I don't drink it anyway because it's like not good for you, but that's pretty messed up." And so it was like, it was a really interesting like moment, and I can still like, it's weird, right? Speaking of nostalgia, right? I
Yeah.
can still remember like the layout of the lunchroom, the kitchen there, and like where the refrigerator was, where the Fruitopia was in the refrigerator, where I was sitting, where he was standing. It's like this all like you just mentioned Fruitopia, and it's like that's the memory I've got, and it's
Yeah.
really clear. And not
Yeah.
a lot of my memories are like super clear, but that one, it's like I remember the entire like everything about it.
Yeah. Oh my
And that's one of
gosh.
those hopes too, right? Like somebody hears a sound effect from a video game, and all of a sudden they're like, that core memory is unlocked of them sitting in a sleepover, getting to play Shadows of the Empire for the first time and being like, video games are never going to look any better than this. Oh my God. Like it's finding ways to get people to relive those moments and remember that, like, hey, maybe you did do some cool stuff
Yeah.
with your life,
Yeah.
even if it was just sitting on the couch with your friends. It was still an absolute blast, and I wouldn't give up any of those memories for the world of me and my friends hanging out and playing video games and
Yeah.
stuff. So,
And a lot of video games don't even build in that couch co-op feature anymore, so people can't even really experience that the same way we did, you know? So that is definitely something to cherish and to hold on to. Do you think
I mean,
do you go ahead.
I was gonna say, I mean, like, speaking of like couch co-op and stuff, like, how many people in chat remember playing 4-player GoldenEye
Oh
or
yeah.
like Mario Party on the N64 or Smash Brothers, the original Smash Brothers back in the day? Like,
I hate
I
my
remember,
friend's game.
I remember one time we got this gigantic snowstorm, and like it was my brother, a friend of ours, and I were sharing a house because it was like a 3-bedroom house we could rent for cheap back then. And like our friend's girlfriend and my girlfriend were at the time were over, and like for whatever reason we got this giant snowstorm, like 4 feet of snow, no joke, right?
Yeah.
And like for whatever reason, when my brother was on his way back from his job because he had this jacked up truck, he comes back and he's got a thing of nacho cheese, a bag of tortilla chips, and a bunch of like pickled jalapenos and stuff. And we're like, for whatever reason, we just decided it was like none of us are going to work tomorrow. We got a 30-pack of beer in the fridge. We're gonna make nachos and we're gonna play Nintendo 64 for the whole night and like get totally drunk. And it was one of the most like fun times. It's like such a strong memory, and like that makes me think about all the stuff that you get when you've got 4 or 5 people playing a game all on the same couch. That's such a like it's such a good time. It's such an amazing like memory, and it's such an amazing thing to share because I'm certain I know everyone here has a memory like that. You have something you think back to of like, yeah, when I tell you that story, you've got your own that you're thinking about.
oh
And
yeah.
those are incredible times.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. 100%. Absolutely. I definitely think back fondly to the times when I used to play Mario Kart 64 with my friends in my room, like those are good times. So, do you think you can be nostalgic for something you all never saw or experienced before? Do you think?
Definitely.
Um,
Like I just did Super Metroid for the first time. And that's one of those games that is always just hyped beyond belief. And it was one of those experiences, like getting to experience it with my chat for the first time and like having something actually live up to every ounce of the hype, if not be better than like I expected after years of being told how great this game was super awesome. And people still bring it up. People still bring up my first KOTOR run, because yeah, even though I didn't experience it when it was original, like the fact that I got to experience that with so many people who did made it that way.
I love that.
I'm 50-50
I was gonna
50-50?
say I can see the words on Pat's face.
because I think you can long for something from the past, but if you haven't experienced it originally, like just by the semantics of the word nostalgia, it doesn't quite fit into it. I
Yeah.
think nostalgia is reliving.
Yeah.
That's to me what nostalgia is. You had to have lived it, and then you want to return to it. So
Mhm.
you can be so. For example, if I missed out on a game that came out, or a movie, I can say, "Wow, that's cool. That's from the time period." I don't know if I could be nostalgic for it because I wasn't there for it. Like I didn't see it originally. It's almost like it's hard to put nostalgia in a bottle and like what exactly is it but to me, it's almost like there's a time travel element to it, to
Mhm.
nostalgia. Like
Mhm.
I was there, I wish I can go back to it. Like
Mhm.
that to me is nostalgia.
Mm.
There might be another word for it, or it's like, well, I want to live in that era that I didn't exist in because it's cool, and that's perfectly fine. To me, I would liken that more towards, this is an extreme example, but like a historical reenactor. That was like,
Mm.
well, this is a cool. I want to like churn butter like I'm living in 1780, but I don't think they can be nostalgic for it. But
Mhm.
they still want to like be entrenched in it and be around it because to them that's like it's almost like their version of living in that time. But I don't know if he could be nostalgic for. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm wrong. But I don't know if he could be nostalgic for it.
There
I think
is actually a word for it. The word for it is
Oh,
anemoia. That is being nostalgic for a time that you've never lived through. And what inspired
I
that
don't. Oh,
question, yeah, anemoia. What inspired
Anamoya.
that question is there is this trend, obviously, like on TikTok and like, like really short form content where people who are younger in the younger generations are like super like they want to create content that feels retro and they like really like romanticize it even though they've never been through it before. That's what
Sure.
kind of inspired it.
So there's a
yeah.
bunch of I watch a lot of these commercials that are in the 80s. When you look at a lot of these 80s commercials and even in a lot of the media, there is a longing through the commercials, and I make fun of it for the 50s. So it's all these people that were probably, they grew up in the 50s and now they're like ad execs advertising to children in the 80s using 50s motifs like 50s diners, old Corvettes that teenagers are driving, these classic like old like 57 Chevys, poodle skirts showing up. And it's something that like I'm looking at that if I was like back then, if I was like say a teenager, would I want to, what's the word, anamoya? Would I want to anamoya for the 50s based upon seeing that stuff in the 80s? And now, like you said, it's sort of like now, you have the Zoomer generation now that want to go back to like the 80s and 90s because they like think, oh, it's a cool time period. And like you said, they're romanticizing the good parts about it. So it's
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know if I would want to go back and live in another time period I didn't grow up in. I've never actually thought about it like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think
Yeah, I
there's
think.
something interesting. Go ahead, Knight.
Oh, I was just saying that, like, I think a lot of times too, we kind of just, when people go back and reminisce, we often just pick the highlights or the high points of it. I don't think we see the whole picture for what the actual setting was. We see, oh, these great games came out, and and everything like that. And I think it's tough because we don't. If you can't live in the time, you don't understand everything. But if you go like for myself, like I missed out on a lot of NES games. So for me, I guess Anamoya because I'm going back and I'm playing a lot of games from the library, and things like that. But I will never understand, what it was like when the game came out. And I
Sure.
think there's a perspective on that. So to answer the question, I agree with Pat on some of that as well.
Yeah, I think
Or because it's hard to get the. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say because yeah, you brought up a great word about the context of when these things appeared. And so you might say, well, I want to, I feel a longing to play or see that movie when it came out in theaters. But that's like, you were distilling it down to just the media itself and not the environment of which it was created. And I think that's more I think about it, that's more nostalgia. It's not just that individual item, it's the environment in which the culture in which it was. And to me, maybe that's the element I was missing in my early explanation. Like, what's the culture of like when people were like first seeing Star Wars in '77, and like the feeling of I don't know what this is I'm going to see. I know that it's going to be cool, and it's nothing like that's ever been on the screen before. Like to me, I can't be nostalgic for that necessarily. I can understand the feeling, but I'm missing out on the overall like feeling of like living in that time and experiencing the media, if that makes sense. It's like a combination almost I think.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, because you
Yeah.
got to have that context and you have to understand, like you said, the environment, the anticipation. What am I going to see? You only seen previews or maybe a poster, like for a movie, for example. Until it happens on the screen, that's when the experience happens. Versus when you're looking about in retrospect, you kind of have a little bit more context and you kind of anticipate it. So I think the experience itself changes when you're actually living in the time versus being nostalgic for it.
Well,
I
and
think there's-
then oh, sorry.
If you don't mind, I think there's an interesting part to this to me, which is I feel like I can have nostalgia for a thing that I haven't seen or experienced before because it's things that come from a time that I remember, right? So I have this really strong memory. I had a Dragon magazine, right? And in the Dragon magazine, they showed this Amiga game called Night Force, and it looked so sick and it was so cool looking. And I didn't have an Amiga, and I didn't have any way to play Amiga games, and it wasn't until like 20 years later that I first got the opportunity to experience anything on the Amiga. And so I have this nostalgia for the idea of the game, right? I have this nostalgia for wanting to play Amiga games that it's not that I'm remembering playing Amiga games. I'm remembering this desire. I'm traveling back in time to the time when I felt all of this stuff for the games that were coming out, but maybe I didn't get to see this game or that game, or maybe I didn't have this system or whatever the case. And so when I go back and I look at a game that like I knew about or was aware of but never saw, that's something that gets me into this like, oh, I'm so excited to play this because I never got the opportunity at the time. That to me is kind of, it's not quite the Anemoia thing because I'm not yearning for a time that I didn't experience. I'm yearning for an experience I missed at a time when I was there, right? I'm yearning for, that's why I'm so excited about the PlayStation 2 library, because I lived through that time. I remember seeing a lot of games come out, but I only had a handful of games because I was so busy elsewhere. And now I'm like, man, I want to play all this stuff that I missed. I want to play all these games that I saw advertisements for, that I was at least aware of, but I didn't experience. And it's like, I want to have that experience. And the way I tailor my own approach to these things is to say, I want to try to recreate that experience as much as I can. I want to see I want to see what the game came with. I want to read the manual. I want to look at the advertisements for it. I want to know what all that context is. I seek that context. And so that fills in these kind of gaps and puts me in a mindset where I can kind of experience the game in a way that I feel like I would have at the time. And that kind of makes me feel a little younger, right? It makes me feel for a moment that I'm doing the things that I could have done before, but I didn't have time. And so that's, I don't know. It's a good feeling, right? I like that feeling.
You're reenacting.
Yeah.
You're reenacting. You're like
Yeah.
historically reenacting.
Kinda.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Business,
So,
did you
it's
want to
interesting.
add anything before we move on to the last question?
Yeah, just revisionist history too. Like, I'm glad that Pat brought up Star Wars, right? Because like, so often, especially now, there's this gatekeeping that happened where it's just like, oh, Star Wars used to be for nerds, and it's just like, no. Like in 1977, Star Wars was literally the biggest movie on the planet. Like it was a cultural zeitgeist that took the world by storm, and then just like everything else, as people started trying to replicate that, it lost a little of its flavor and its magic. And the same thing happens with video games. People complain about like
Pac-Mania.
clones of games. Yeah, Pac-Mania, like clones of games and microtransactions, when the continue screen in the arcade was the original microtransaction, right? It's literally a quarter and it's pay to win. Like with those X-Men games, you can literally, with X-Men and The Simpsons, those are all, essentially, if you can't do it through skill, which you can do, but if you want to, you can brute force it and pay to win through those arcade games, right? Like the old school, like arcade people talk about how like the arcade scene really changed when it came from a game of skill to being able to just put in another quarter, right? So like these are the things that people forget, and the revisionist stuff that happens where it's just like, oh no, it was so great, and we didn't have 800 clones of Mortal Kombat that were all completely garbage, like flooding the market. It's like, no, yes, there were 8 different versions of Doom as well. Like they do just, just as much as they've re-released Skyrim, they re-released Doom back in the day, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's just to say like, oh, it was so much better when they did do this. It's like, no, it was just packaged in a different way, but these things were still happening. So, nostalgia can be a little dangerous in that, like where we don't remember that, like, oh my God, like Chuck E. Cheese literally was Las Vegas for kids and they were making us gamble for tickets instead of, money. And we got, pencil erasers as our rewards instead. But like, it is the same shit as like with like loot boxes and like the gambling stuff that we're dealing with in digital games today. Like it is a lot of the same techniques and preying upon people to get them to spend money.
Yeah.
I mean, well, that's a tale as old as time, is trying to separate people from their money. Whatever
Yeah,
way
carnival games. Yeah.
I mean, I was just, I was in the Seaside Heights Boardwalk a few weeks ago, and they still have the wheels that are gambling wheels that are somehow legal. I mean, so yeah. Anyway,
Yep.
Oh my gosh. Well, this has been such a great discussion. We're going to go on to our last question, which is, what advice do you have for broadcasters who want to focus on nostalgic/retro content? I'm going to start with Duke. And yeah, go ahead, Duke.
So my advice, and this is I think a bit broader than the current topic, but my advice is if you are either starting out streaming, or if you're changing gears, you're moving from another type of content to retro content, nostalgic kind of stuff, pick something you love. Like, you need to fall in love with the thing that you're doing, because that's going to shine through into everything that you do. Pick something that makes you laugh. Pick something that makes you cry. Pick something that just absolutely touches your heart, or that makes you so excited you can't stop talking about it. Pick whatever it is, right? And if it's a game that you already know and you're like already in love with, that's great. If it's a game that you've been waiting to play for decades and you haven't got the opportunity, like, do it. Like, get right into the thing that is the most, like, the closest to your heart and the deepest in your mind to get yourself excited about it. And that's going to be infectious. That's going to spill over into your audience. That's going to attract people. And like, if somebody, like, if you're streaming to like just a couple of people and somebody comes in with a raid and they're like, hey, what are you playing? And you're like, oh my God, this game is so good. Nobody knows about this game. I don't see people talking about this, but I love this game. Like, check this out. And you can do this thing, and there's that thing that you can do. And it's just, it's so cool. And I wish more people would, like, people are going to stay. People are going to be like, wow, look at what you're doing. This is amazing. I want to see more of this, because you're so excited about what you're doing. You're so invested in the content that you're producing. You're so happy. You're so happy to be sharing everything that's going to really, like, that's going to grab people and just pull them right in. And that's going to, like, whether you're starting out, whether you're changing your content format and some of your viewers are like, no, this isn't the game you normally play. They'll come in and they'll see that you're so excited about what you're doing. They're going to stay and they're going to be like, wow, I haven't seen you like this excited about something in a long time. And so it's gonna really resonate, and that's gonna pull people in. That's gonna make them excited about it. They're gonna be excited to share the stuff that they feel the same way about, share similar games that you might like because of what you're excited about, and they're going to just like everybody around you is gonna be like, wow, this is great. I love this energy and positivity, and you're doing so much with this. It's gonna give you a lot of momentum to like really to really make that into something that's not just like a one-time thing, or it's not going to like fizzle out, because you're going to hook people in and they're going to be excited. They're going to be as excited as you are.
Yeah. I think that's good advice for streaming in general too.
Yeah, that's what exactly, right?
Mm-hmm.
It applies to anything really, but like with retro stuff and nostalgic stuff, it really hits home because everybody has personal stories about stuff. You have all these like really deep feelings about a time when you played this game, or like even like oh, I remember like somebody was burning incense when I was playing The Legend of Zelda for the first time. So this smell, like when I play The Legend of Zelda, I think about like this dark room. There's all this stuff that
Yeah.
that goes along with that, and those stories get people to understand you, right?
Yeah.
It was said earlier, people aren't coming to your stream to watch a game. You want people coming to your stream to watch you,
You. Yep. Anybody else have
and that
any advice
that hooks into it.
yeah, thank you, Duke, for sharing all of that.
Can't top
Of
that.
course.
That's perfect.
Yeah.
There are
I-
those classic games, like especially with retro. Just think about what's in everybody's like kind of top 20 games: Chrono Trigger, Knights of the Old Republic, the first 3 Resident Evil games. There are those games that not only will it always be fun to watch people play for the first time, but then you as a broadcaster can ask those questions to keep the conversation going in your chat. What was your first, memory of this game? What was your biggest moment of success? What was the biggest hurdle you had to overcome? What was the boss that gave you the most trouble? Like there are just so many jumping off points for those conversations that you can just keep game adjacent, where you don't have to like try to find 100 different topics to talk about. You can keep it primarily focused on the game that you're talking about and keep that as the general topic, and then there's so many different branching off points that you can use while playing that game.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely.
And just to add on, there's also so many different ways, especially right now, to stream retro games. Like
Mhm.
retro achievements. You're using the Mr. FPGA. Are you playing on original hardware? And like Duke said, having passion behind it, and also taking that passion and you go, well, everyone's played Ninja Gaiden, but how can I do it my way that I really enjoy it and that people can relate to you? Because if you're passively just playing the games, you got to have that connection. And like I mentioned earlier, storytelling. Where's
Mhm.
the connection? And I think that's just a big emphasis I wanted to make.
Yeah, I agree. Because it then further like supports the reason of why they would come to watch you versus like anybody else.
Yeah, it's about
100%.
the journey, and also they want to see how you're doing. Well, we're gonna check in today. I wonder what he's up to. Or
Yeah.
maybe you do it the opposite way. I don't know what we're doing, but we're gonna spin a wheel. And we're gonna find out what we're gonna play today.
Yeah.
It's how you present it, and I think that's also important too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's to bring another streamer that I know into the conversation about that, right? One of the streamers that I watch frequently is doing a challenge to 100% complete every N64 game.
Wow.
And as a result of that, we're learning so much about how weird and messed up these games are. Like Blues Brothers on N64, in the manual, it shows a health bar with 8 hearts. There are not 8 hearts in the game. Nobody's
Wow.
found an 8th heart. So it's like it's this incredible like journey to see everybody, like each person's individual way of approaching things. And it's like some people have done like, oh, I'm going to play to completion each N64 game, or just the North American library,
Yeah.
or whatever different approach, right? Or oh, I'm going to speed run this particular N64 game. So you learn all the tricks of the speed run and all the like little technical foibles of it. And
Yeah.
then when you see someone go like, okay, what does 100% even mean for this mahjong game, like from Japan, that like what do you even do? How do you
How do you 100%
say that
it?
it's complete?
Yeah.
Right. And
Yeah.
it's really interesting to see that exploration. And I would recommend for everyone, like, find a thing that you're really into doing.
Yeah.
Because even if it sounds onerous and like difficult, if your energy is for that, you're gonna have such a good time. And
Yeah.
you're gonna have so many things to do.
Yeah. Agree. Agree. Pat, do you have anything to add before we outro and close out?
No, I guess don't be afraid to jump into something you haven't experienced before, even
Mhm.
if in theory, you want to be connected to some of the stuff. But it's not like it's not like a law that you have to have lived through some of these things that you're now bringing to life. As long as you have the passion to learn about them, as long as you want to learn, and you want to pass along some knowledge, even if you didn't grow up playing the games or watching the commercials, like that's really all that matters is the passion that Duke put more eloquently than I did. Like that's all it comes down to. Like your audience knows whether or not you're faking it in whatever content you're doing, whether it's streaming, whether it's YouTube, whatever, podcasting, whatever you dabble in, like the audience can sniff out whether or not you're actually into it.
110%.
One more thing I like to add is that, how well you play the game or how well you don't play the game, that don't matter. It's how much fun you're having. And as long as we keep playing these games, and whether you're watching these movies, as long as we keep watching and talking about them, they continue to exist. And I think that's the important thing, is that when you start streaming retro stuff or whatever, it's commercials or games, you're doing the part of keeping that cycle going and keeping the history of these games alive. And I think that's the bigger picture we should be looking at too.
Yeah, I agree, because future generations won't know unless we continue to share this stuff. The moment we stop sharing this stuff is when it dies. So 100% agree. Yeah.
It'll be my life mission that no one will ever forget peanut butter boppers.
Now I know. Now I know. And I need to find out more. Exactly.
Time to buy stock.
Well, thank you so much, everybody, for being here.
We're going to see you with a peanut butter bopper and a bell beefer.
Oh my gosh. Oh my Pat makes the home version. That's going to be the next stream. Pat makes the home version. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your insight. Thank you for everything that you have given to me and the community tonight. And if you missed any part of this, I'm going to upload the VOD to YouTube, but I would really love it if each one of you can tell everyone where they can find you, so that they can enjoy more of your content. That would be great. I'm going to start with Pat, then go to Knight, then Duke, then Biz.
At Country Code every Wednesday, I stream on Twitch only once a week. I've had a podcast for over 10 years about retro games called The Completely Unnecessary Podcast. I've been on YouTube since 2008. Pat the NES Punk. I'm all over the place, and books and things and whatever. So.
We'll see you at Long Island Retro. I'm really excited about that.
And I make my return to Long Island Retro Gaming Expo in a couple weeks with Ash.
Yeah. Night.
You can catch me on twitch.tv/MRRKNIGHT. And you can also catch me on IWTV. I also do play-by-play commentary for pro wrestling. I do that a couple times a month. So you can catch me on there as well, about 3 or 4 times a month. And yeah.
Knight will never tell us how to say their username.
Yes, that's why I spelled it out. People thought they were.
I thought I was gonna find out.
Every time I just look at it and I see monthly recurring revenue, and I'm like, he's the monthly recurring revenue Knight.
Duke.
You can find me by mousing over my name in the stream title, and all of my social links are there.
Nice.
How about that?
Yeah, I love it. I love it.
Short and simple.
Twitch.tv/DukeDonuts, YouTube.com/DukeDonuts. I stream on YouTube once a week. I stream on Twitch 5 times a week.
Yeah.
Why do I stream so often?
It's fun.
Anyway, because
I love it.
Because I love it.
You love it.
I was going to say something, but my mind is blank. So. Oh, Ash.
Yes.
Thank you for having us here.
Yes,
of
thank you for getting us together.
Oh my God, my pleasure. Of course. Biz.
And Biz.
I'm on Twitch and Twitter at business BIZSNES. Feel free to reach out. I'm always, if you ever want to talk about improv, I'm actually doing a class that Ash is going to be a part of at San Diego TwitchCon this year. Which is really, really exciting. So thank you, Ash, for wanting to yes and in front of an audience. So that's very, very exciting. I also help run a convention for Metal Gear Solid. We just had our second convention and it's sold out. So if you are thinking about like I should do a retro convention for the specific video game, do it, because you never know how many people will show up and celebrate that game. And believe me, there is a market for it. And yeah, so if you have any questions in that realm, how do I start a convention and all of that stuff, I'd be more than happy to share all of the knowledge that I have. I've always been an improv teacher, and I love teaching people. I truly believe a rising tide raises all boats on this platform. So any way I can help any of you out, let me know, and I would be more than happy to do that.
Oh my God. I am on the same wavelength with you. Like, the more we help each other, the more that we grow together, the better this platform gets. So thank you so much for saying that. And Knight, Scorpio wants to know, where do you do your wrestling commentary?
Oh, sure. They have a Twitch, which is twitch.tv/Excite Wrestling, like the letter X. And they also stream their big events on IWTV. So if you've subscribed to IWTV, their archive will be on there, so you can watch matches.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, I'm going to raid Hungry Gorilla, speaking of nostalgic content, who is
Oh.
currently playing Warriors
Hungry
of the
for a raid.
Eternal Sun. Yeah, it's going to be
Awesome.
yeah, it's going to be a fun
Love that
time.
game.
Love Hungry Gorilla, love this game. And once again, a huge thank you to all of my guests, Pat, Knight, Duke, and Business. Thank you so much for this lovely conversation. I really appreciate your
Thank you,
time.
Ash.
Please go and give them all a follow. And I'll see you all next time. I think the next streamer strategy show I'm going to do is either going to be on speedrunning or charity. So I'm working on it. All right. Thanks, y'all. We'll see y'all next time. Bye.
I
See you
Bye,
later.
everybody.
Okay, going into the raid. Hold on one second. Raid now. And we should be good.